So it seems that the JVM was crashing, and when I removed it, myself, it started working right off the bat. So let's get back. So what we had over there was like trivial Hello World Vaadin application, and what I wanted to show is basically I create a button and I listen for changes over here, and when I'm clicking a button, I'm clearly just adding labels on the screen. So really simple. But because this is just server-side Java, what we can do over here, we can actually add breakpoints over here. When I click a button right now, it actually stops into this breakpoint. So it kind of jumps into the debugger right away. I can inspect the component tree and so forth. Let's continue. And when I click continue, you actually see that the same application running on the screen. And we can modify the application so we could actually, thank you for clicking, save it, and continue clicking. I saved it. No, I didn't save it. What happens? There's something really bad happening to my... Yeah. I guess I was kind of playing with the idea on the plane, and the Eclipse noticed that I'm jumping.
The jealousy plug in.
Yeah, it's paying me back. No, I mean, if I'm pressing save button, this happens. So it's doing completely random stuff.
Can it be yourself?
I mean, how can it be? I save. Okay, now it saves. I don't know what happened. Let's try it again. Save it, reload it, and yeah. So what I was kind of saying that I can do code modification right from there without even actually reloading the web page. The thing is that over there is UI class is basically what you are seeing on the web page, and the init is only run once. So if I want to kind of, for example, change the caption of the button, I should, after saving, I should actually reload the web page to see the new button over there. But let's start from scratch. It seems that the Eclipse is going so smoothly that it's easy to build really from scratch. So I'll just delete the whole thing and actually let's start from there with an empty UI. And so let's build a document managing application from scratch. So first of all, we want to kind of show some documents, and I happen to have a pile of HTML files on the disk, so we could use these instead of, I guess in real life you would use MongoDB or JPA or something like that, but I'll just use the file system. So we just load some files from the file system, and I just have these over there. So now we have like bunch of files from the file system, and then we want to kind of somehow choose one of the files. So let's put, let's say, combo box on the screen, and let's say list of files. And let's say choose a file from these docs. And then we just set this the content of our web page. Set content list, save, and reload this thing. So we have a list over there. The list is actually show temp docs. Oh yeah, I know what's the wrong. I rebooted my machine, so it emptied temp directory. I do have the file over there. So now we actually see a list of files from file system. Things like paging work out of the automatically over there. I can do auto completion for these file names and so forth. And basically this part we just coded 2 lines, so basically data source and the combo box. And we can actually use the fact that all of Vaadin components, they share the same data source interfaces. So we could say table instead of a combo box, like this, and save it. And now we should have a table of those files. And things like lazy loading from the file system while I'm scrolling is automated, so I don't have to code anything for it. So I guess this kind of explains the difference to AngularJS. We are working on a higher level over here, so instead of kind of manipulating DOM elements and implementing AJAX calls over the wire to fetch more data and APIs for actually fetching these file names, we just use high-level components and wire these together. So the next thing would be to show something on the one of those files on the screen as well, so we could just use label for it.
Can you talk about what happens behind the scenes? Does
Yeah.
it generate, is it like GWT where it generates JavaScript code and for every component, or do you have like a runtime component which executes?
So what happens is when I go to this web page, it basically loads a pre-compiled JavaScript file. This JavaScript files implements those widgets, so table widget and button widget and tree widget, even though we are not using the tree widget over here. And this is, you could say, like thin client. And this thin client connects back to the server side, to our application, and it asks from this UI of ours, the UI being that UI class, that hey, could you give me the component tree that you want to have on the screen? And the component tree happens to be this content over there, so just one combo box. So what is sent over the wire is actually JSON describing this initial combo box or the contents of this combo box, basically 10 items showing on this page. So this is what happens.
So you generate also a servlet on the server side, which basically is
Sorry,
you implemented also servlet, you generated servlet, or?
actually our servlet is right over here. So it's just an empty servlet over there. So this servlet extends one servlet that basically binds this client and the server side together.
And the protocol that you use to talk to a server is it's like a
Yeah, it's JSON. So let me show us. Maybe on. No, maybe I show it. So I'll open up the debug window over there. And way too large. Anyways, I want to show the interactions there. Or maybe I show it different level, just like in the inspector. Not go goes over the wire. So let's scroll a bit. We clearly made another Ajax call over the wire, and we should see.
I think you have to click this record button there. It's all right.
I'll open up in Chrome and never use Safari for this. So. Scroll a bit. So you see these calls to this UIDL address. This is basically user interface description language address. So if I open one of these, it basically says what are sent over the wire. So the response is basically JSON that describes the new rows, the contents of the new rows that are coming to the screen.
And okay, and this component that you inherited from, that's the one that actually implements the protocol to.
Yeah, it's basically built into the Vaadin.
This is UIDL UI description language, I assume.
Yeah.
This is your proprietary language?
Yeah, it's a proprietary language and it's like internal to the components. I'll come back to how these components are wired together a bit later on. So let's first see kind of how you can use these components and then how you build new components and actually how these components talk to each other from client to the server and back. So where were we? We had a table, yeah, label. Good. So let's show one document over there as a label. So it could be empty in the beginning, and we want to show basically HTML on the screen. Let's just put these two guys on the screen. Maybe we could use like vertical or vertical split panel as a layout. Put this as content, and in the layout we add first our table and then our document. So basically this should be both on the screen now with the split panel over there. Maybe for the list we could say please use all of the space given to you so it layouts a bit nicer. I mean like fills the whole space. And then we want to select something from the screen. So we could say the list add value change listener, and whenever a value is changed over there, we should put the contents of that file into this label. So we say document set the data source, and this is just a text file. And what text file we are showing, we could ask from the list which one is selected. So get the selected value. And of course now we should be able to also select something from the list. So we say list set selectable true. So now we can select something from the list. And because this we cannot avoid the fact that this is running inside a web browser, and what I'm calling is actually on the server side. So we have to go over the wire for this selection action. And while Vaadin is pretty much automated, sometimes it makes sense to give it a hint that, hey, I want to have this action immediately back to me on the server side. We don't want to wait for next Ajax call. So we could say that, hey, list, please send these immediately to the server side. And now I should actually be able to select things from the screen. The Eclipse wouldn't be fighting me. Amazing. It must be the IntelliJ. It has been working pretty well this far. Now I gotta decide I should be going the IntelliJ. And it's not working anymore. Any hints? What did I do incorrectly?
Try to remove the last row you added.
Try commenting and chunk out, see if that helps.
Yeah,
It doesn't
Set
do
immediate.
error messages.
yeah, the code itself is okay. It's not over there. So it's the same Tomcat. Yeah, it's the same Tomcat. I'll restart it once more. Unbelievable. What sometimes helps with Tomcat is clean. And then there's this clean Tomcat. Just in case. It really is helping my kind of decision of jumping to idea. Yeah, I don't know. So now when I'm choosing something from here, I actually see the contents of the label, contents of the file in this label, and things like kind of optimize the communications are pretty much automated. So for example, if I kind of keep my key pressed and it doesn't actually change the content of the label before I can raise my finger from the key. And as you can see, the interactions are pretty fast. So it's quite interactive even though it's running on the server side. So we could do one more thing because this is going so smoothly with Eclipse.
So you're not setting all the JavaScript events that you get back to the server. You're filtering it based on what?
So basically, what happens when I'm clicking over there? The table component on the client side, it highlights this row as blue set style for this DOM element, and then it sends an Ajax call to the server side. Hey, Joonas has clicked this row, and this event goes to my code over here, value change listening code that we just wrote, and then we set the property data source for this label. Basically, reset the contents of the label, and after that, Vaadin takes over, analyzes that hey, this label has been changed. I'll send the changes to the content of the label back to the client side.
So it means the client component that you have, the JavaScript code that you have, is basically making the decision what events it forwards, right? So for example, if you would
Yes,
do like
yes and
blur
no.
and focus and stuff like that?
No, yes and no. So in this case, it actually didn't guess it correctly in the first place. So we had to instruct Vaadin that hey, I want to have this event immediately back to me on the server side. If I wouldn't have written this set immediate true over there, it would have sent this selection event when it goes to the server side next time anyways. Some components default to going to the server side directly, like button. When I click a button, it goes to it basically, the default for the set immediate is true. for other components, they are false. So for example, if I fill a form, I might fill all the fields in the form before going to the server side.
Let's say if you want to do some, I don't know, button changes on blur and stuff like that, would you send the blur events?
No. Normally we don't send any mouse move or blur events or drag events or anything like that before something actually happens. Drag and drop is kind of a special case. So in drag and dropping, it's typical that when you're dragging, let's say, from a tree, a node to a table, you might kind of test whether this is droppable on certain table line. So we actually, in this kind of cases, we provide both client-side and server-side ways of doing the tests. So if you want to do server-side tests, like try out actually reading something from the database, whether you can drop it on this table line, you can actually go to the server-side. But this is really kind of rare. Normally you just send some kind of client-side test that, hey, you can only drag to these first 3 lines, and then it doesn't actually go over the wire while you're drag and dropping. So the actual communications are pretty optimized, even though the idea sounds pretty chatty. And I don't know if you have heard of this company, Magnolia. It's one of the CMS companies, and they switched their UI layer fully over to Vaadin-based UIs. And before making the decision, they were really worried about this chattiness. Is it too chatty for us? So they actually compared to Google Web Toolkit and Vaadin, and made the prototypes for both and measured the web traffic or the network traffic. And it turned out that in some cases actually Vaadin was quite a bit less chatty than GWT. And the reason for it is that it's quite typical programming paradigm in AngularJS and GWT that you update things on the screen by doing an Ajax call and then putting some data on the screen. So what happens if you have a screen where there are multiple components updating? You actually might, for one user interaction, you might have like 4 different parallel Ajax connections going to the server side and fetching data in parallel. While in Vaadin, we kind of guarantee that there is at most 1 request going to the server side. So it's not that kind of clear-cut story. In practice, when you are kind of hand optimizing all the communications, you always are better than framework that is kind of guessing how to do it.
Do you have a connection open all the time, or do you always build up a connection?
It's up to you. So in this case now we are having a Ajax connection, but we also support push, so we support WebSockets and so forth. And if you are running this over the WebSockets, it's really kind of lightweight communications. I'll come back to that as well. So now we have a kind of basically list of documents over there. What I want to demo is that in Vaadin, most of the time you actually are just writing new UI components. So what we could do, we could actually create a new UI component over here as a composite for editing this file. Create an editor component. The component itself is just an empty custom component. The cool thing over there is that we can actually go also to design mode, and we can start drag and dropping things around. So we could say, let's take a tab sheet, drag it over here, bind these to these corners, like that, and let's see, put rich text area over here and text area over the other tab. We could resize these like that. Maybe we could kind of edit and say that, hey, this is maybe it's just fine as it. Basically what we did, we were editing Java code, so it generated this piece of Java over there. But all in all, this is basically just one new Vaadin component. We can start using it right away. So we can, instead of using a label over there, we could use our new editor component, like this. save it, and it almost works. Actually, we are missing one method. So let's create this method over there. So basically, how we are setting a data source to our new component. So we could say a text file. Sorry, what did we have over there? We had rich text editor. And we are putting a text file over there, and then we also had text area and put it over there as well. Save, and now our new component is done. We save it, and let's see what Eclipse does this time. Actually, it works. So, surprise! This time it did work. So basically, we can now choose a file from here. We can actually start editing the file. So we can write something over there. We can actually jump between two different editors, so we have this HTML editor over there as well as we drag that, and we can do the same text over there.
The editing is happening on the client side.
Actually, yes and no again. So this is server client framework. So my tab switch actually goes back to the server side, but things like making this bold, it actually stays on the client side. So now the only times when we go to the server side is when I'm switching a tab. But actually, cool thing over there is that if I'm changing the other file over here and come back to there, it actually remembers this. So what actually happens when I'm going over the wire, it actually saves back to this file. So now we have like full stack application, even though really simple application, that saves into the files, and these components are listening for the change events from each other. So if I'm editing something over here, if I can find something from the HTML. Save anything. So it actually has this foo over there, so it kind of notified these events. Okay, so this is, I almost said that this was what I wanted to demo. I didn't want to demo this, having all these demo effects, but I guess you kind of can see through the demo effects that the program model itself is pretty simple. Let's go back to the keynote. I still have it open.
Nice aside question.
Yep.
The graphical editor in Eclipse, what is that written? That's a plugin with.
It's written in Vaadin, of course.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it actually what happened, the graphical editor over there, it's just the Vaadin application. This part of the Eclipse, it's embedded web browser. All of this drag and dropping, it's done in Vaadin. So this is actually server-side Java that the whole editor is built in. And you can run the same editor on a web page, but regular web browser. Around here. Okay, the third thing about Vaadin, basically there was three different principles that we are building on. Modularity or components, as well as this client-server model. The third thing is that we are embracing Java, and I mean like standard Java. And it means that because we are running everything on a real JVM, you can actually use any language to build these UIs. So Scala is pretty popular for building Vaadin UIs. Groovy tends to be more and more popular, but people are trying really strange languages. Like the most disturbing example that I saw was somebody building a COBOL-based UI in Vaadin. I think it was more of an April's Fool joke, but it actually ran, so it was embarrassing. The end user themselves, they don't need anything special to run it, so basically any web browser will do. There are no browser plugins, nothing to install, and it runs in any environment that can run Java. On the tooling side, Eclipse is there is a plugin for Eclipse, IntelliJ and NetBeans. So basically for Eclipse, what you do, you just go to Eclipse Marketplace and download Vaadin plugin. Same goes with the NetBeans, and for the IntelliJ it's built into the IntelliJ Ultimate Edition. Maven, there are basically all parts of Vaadin, they support Maven really well, and there are also like example scripts for Ant if you really want to use Ant. There are plugins for Gradle as well, so pretty much everything in Java ecosystem are quite well supported because we are just building on standard Java. So there isn't actually nothing special in this. We are just building plain old Java objects for everything. All the components are just normal Java objects. So it's tools like JRebel work out of the box with Vaadin. So what's happening with Vaadin lately? The newest version, Vaadin 7.1. And it basically builds on top of, I would say, like the biggest renewal of Vaadin in recent years. The whole framework was started in year 2001 already, so it's pretty old framework. And we kind of had a lot of dust piling up in the corners of the framework, so we didn't do a rewrite, but we changed many parts of the framework. We added basically all the kind of new fancy stuff around, starting from HTML5 support, built-in SASS compiler. We added full support for building UIs in JavaScript as well, and so forth. We also kind of, Vaadin has been this really server-side framework that you have been seeing now, basically writing on the server side, and we automate you away from the web stuff. In Vaadin 7, we actually opened this web side of the story fully for you, so you can actually build things on the client side in Java, compile them to JavaScript, or in JavaScript as well. I don't go into feature what's new in Vaadin 7 because there are quite a few.
How much can you actually customize can you theme the components? Like, do you use Bootstrap and other stuff that you could modify so that you have your own look and feel?
Yeah, you can modify the look and feels fully. They are just CSS. You can build components clearly. All those 400 something plugins, they are built by somebody. So there is it is really easy to build new components to Vaadin. You can take any existing GWT component and integrate that easily with Vaadin, or any JavaScript component integrate that with Vaadin. So pretty much everything out there works. So I'll show a couple of things from there. One of the favorite ones is GWT. We have been building on top of GWT for, I think, since 2007, 2008, something like that. And the relationship has basically been that, hey, we have been using this external product GWT and using that under the hood as our rendering engine. A couple of years ago, we actually merged GWT directly inside Vaadin. So we took a full copy, basically forked GWT, put that inside Vaadin Framework, and now we are kind of maintaining that in parallel with the mainline GWT. So whatever fixes we are doing over there, we are pushing these back to the main GWT repository. So it basically puts Vaadin in a situation that you can take any GWT application and actually run that with Vaadin, because all parts of GWT are included in Vaadin directly. But more interestingly, we kind of add second program model into Vaadin. So you have this server-side program model that is optimized for the productivity, as you said, as you saw in this demo. But there is also this client-side program model that is optimized for control. So basically, you have control over the communications, which things and how they are sent over the wire, how you are manipulating DOM, and so forth. So you have full access to everything inside web browser. And these two things are combined within the same framework. And the way how we do it is basically, we require two parts to be written, the backend part and the UI class, basically that UI class that we just wrote.
And you have a rendering engine, I assume, on the browser side, is that right?
Yes.
Your proprietary rendering engine.
I'll show it. It's I'll come into that. So on the backend side, you can run the backend on the same server or in a different server. But how we go over the wire is that we use server-side Java components, plain old Java objects, trees and buttons and so forth. And for each of these components, we have a client-side widget. So for a button widget that we use, we have this button Java class over here, and we have button Java class over here. This client-side part is compiled to JavaScript. And then these two guys, their responsibility is to be in sync. So whenever I'm changing the state of the button, let's say put a new caption into that, it's the responsibility of the button to send that over the wire, the client-side button to render it. And it's the responsibility of the client-side button to actually capture all the UI events, send these back to my server-side button, and route these to developers' code here on the UI layer. So these two guys, they kind of encapsulate all the traffic between the client and the server in the optimal manner that suits for these components themselves. On the client side, there is also theme, basically CSS, and with GUID we can actually add UIs also onto the client side. So if you want to have part of the application that doesn't communicate back to the server side, let's say it works on offline fully, we can write that part over here using the client side components. And later on, when we have the connectivity, we can synchronize databases or whatnot. But for that, we have to write some kind of service layer here on the server side. So the downside of writing on the UI side is that we go from this one layer story into 3-layer story. So you add complexity. But it is kind of up to you to decide that, hey, this part of the application can be written on the server side and that part on the client side.
How do you ensure that, let's say, you mentioned that a lot of the widgets that you have are community built, right? How do you ensure that this new widget runs with all browsers?
We don't. So whatever is in the framework itself, like the core widgets, we guarantee that these run on all the supported browsers. If you go to the directory, let's see. Loading the directory. I don't have network, but so in the directory for each widget, basically it's responsibility of the author to list that, hey, we support that or that browser. There is no guarantees that those authors actually are careful in listing all those browsers, so it makes sense to test. But it's like any open source community. So if you pick one component from there, it's your responsibility to actually make sure that the component works.
So do you usually have like, I think of it as a proxy and a JavaScript HTML piece, and then you have like a proxy piece on the server side, right? Do you have usually like a combination, like for every browser? Do you always have both, or do you need only one proxy and you can have multiple?
Good question. So on the client side, for all the components that we create, we rely on Google Web Tool compiler, and this compiler actually generates multiple permutations of this JavaScript, basically one for each web browser. So I try to kind of go over the browser differences like memory leaks in IE and so forth. That said, the actual DOM implementation, what kind of DOM we can use, what kind of CSS we can use in different browsers is up to the component authors themselves to decide.
But so do you generate the proxy for it too?
Yes, I'll show an example about that in a bit. Before that example, a quick peek into SASS. Who knows what is SASS? No, with 2 S. So this is a notation over CSS. CSS, everybody has been using CSS. But if you are building something complex with CSS, like a full theme for Vaadin, it becomes easily quite unmanageable and complex. So we kind of decided for Vaadin 7 that we need to have some kind of high level notation for CSS, and instead of kind of coming up with kind of inventing one by ourselves, we kind of took a look of the market. There were two good, really good implementations, SASS and less, and we ended up actually choosing SASS. But then the problem was that this SASS is based on Ruby. So after a bit of thinking, we did really stupid decision and re-implemented this from scratch. So we have our own Java-based SASS compiler in Vaadin. So it was quite a bit larger project than we thought originally to implement that compiler from scratch.
Just curious, why didn't you pick less?
I guess that basically with both we had the same hassle. Less is simply JavaScript, so we would have we didn't want to add any dependencies, either Ruby or Rhino. In the end of the day, it was more of the design guys who decided that the SASS syntax is a bit nicer than less syntax. But I guess both are pretty good. Maybe I will show this in practice. So this has nothing to do with Vaadin. So if you are building any CSS, I truly recommend into taking a look at this. Restart my demo server. Takes a while. I have many projects over there. Okay. Find source from here. So basically what it does, it gives you simple things over CSS. It's like superset of CSS. But you can add variables. So for example, I could define variable blue like this, and I can reuse it all over my theme or all over my style sheets like that. So if I redefine blue as let's say 55F and compile it, I get this over here as a border color. But the cool thing is that I can also calculate colors. So we can take a blue and start to darken it by 9%, so we get 22F over there. So that way we could actually define a set of base colors in our style sheets and calculate related colors. We can also define mixins. So mixins are like reusable pieces of CSS. So we define this padding mixing over there, and then we can include this padding mixing over there and even use parameters. They are like functions, but for CSS. And it also allows us to structure the CSS a bit better like that. But there are many features in SASS. So that I would say that if you are anyhow interested in SASS, Google for it, and there are good tutorials for SASS. Skip forms as well, and go back to the data side, because this is what you have been asking all the time. So in Vaadin, we started in year 2000 from actually rendering static web pages, and we used XSLT as a rendering engine for that. And somehow we were able to use the same communication protocol for almost 10 years. We just can transform the internals from being XML into JSON and transport to Ajax and so forth. So it was pretty flexible. But in the end of the day, we decided, hey, we redesigned this from scratch on top of RPC, and then we also designed what we call state. So the system is such that when we have this widget, let's say button widget on the client side and the button component on the server side, there are two ways of communicating between these. So first of all, it's a responsibility of the widget author to build connection between these. We call them connectors. So this is just a Java class that is kind of responsible for gluing this widget into this server-side component. And actually this widget can be completely external, so it can be like existing Google Maps widget, and you just implement the connector for it and the server-side APIs. And there are two ways of communicating. Either you can do two-ways RPC calls from server to client to server in Java, and these get compiled to JavaScript automatically. But then there is also this state mechanism. It's basically plain old Java object residing on the server side, where you can put any kind of properties or new Java objects inside of it. So there can be lists and hash maps and whatnot in the state. And the cool thing is that whatever is changed in the state on the server side automatically gets sent to the client side. So if I put to the button state a new caption, this caption is immediately readable on the client side.
Is it like
of the state.
ASP.NET view state that you process the data in the client and then we transmit that?
I'm not sure. I don't know .NET from that part. The idea over there that this is actually server-side state, so it only kind of pushes state from the client, from the server to the client. Actually show it from the sampler. So there is also non-functional samples like state. So this thing here on the left, this is actual GWT widget implementing a to-do list. There is a API on the server side, and in the middle there is a state that is basically a list of Java objects. And these objects are tasks, so we can actually server side call add task, and it adds that to a, I think this is just an array list. In the array list we could remove these. And the thing is that the state changes are actually reflected right away here on the client side in this widget. But this is one way. So to go the other way around, here is the same state object over there. We can actually, if we, let's say we change the caption over there on the client side, it sends an RPC call from the client to the server side, but also we can push things from the server to the client side. So we do an RPC call from the server to the client side. So there are multiple ways of communicating. A bit more details. So these RPCs basically work in such a way that you just define these as an interface. Let's say for a button we could define a click method. So basically somebody clicks this button on the client side. For the client, it's pretty simple. We say RPC proxy create, we give this interface, and we actually get the implementation automatically created for us. So we can just start to use this implementation and say, if we create this RPC, we can say rpc.click, and it just works and sends Ajax call over the wire. Other way around, on the server side, we can just implement this interface as you normally implement the interface, and then register it, and after that you start receiving these calls. And the rest of it is automated under the hood. JavaScript, you were asking about how to integrate JavaScript with Vaadin. There are two ways. We can basically publish JavaScript API from the server side. So this is Java code on the server side. We get page, get JavaScript and add a function, let's say my callback function. And after that, anybody here on the same page on the client side can say window my callback. And this call gets routed automatically to our code on the server side. And you can do it the other way around as well, call things from the server side to client There are also ways to wrap around existing widgets. I'll go into these as they are a bit more advanced. So basically just take existing widget, publish API on the server side, and they get auto-wired. Interesting thing is server push that we introduced in 7.1. So it's actually really simple to define.
You're using the website, right?
Yes and no. So it detects what your browser can
Falls
support.
back.
Yeah, if the browser can support WebSockets, we use WebSockets. If it doesn't, then it falls back to HTTP streaming or HTTP long polling, depending on the browsers. So what was our application called again?
It's the jack.
Yes.
G.
Okay, let's not go over there. But maybe I just showed it in the code what I want to show. So basically this application here is now working over Ajax. In order to get this to work over WebSockets, we just would say push, and now this works over the WebSocket. So it's really simple to actually switch from Ajax to WebSockets. What else should I show you? How much time do we have? Half an hour. Maybe you could do in such a way that I have what I have left is basically what's happening next with Vaadin and how to get started. Maybe we could jump first to how to get started, then have some questions, and if you have some time, jump what's happening next with Vaadin.
I did have one question that maybe
Yeah.
you could address. So when you switched from 6 to 7, your support for Rue got shaky. And I wonder if that's ever coming back.
It's not coming back, sorry.
Okay.
So we had this really tough situation as all the companies who have many products that we had to, in order to kind of implement new stuff in the product, we had to kind of choose one product to drop. And we were asking around, and there weren't too many Rue users around, so we decided that, hey, we are not porting this Rue into Vaadin 7. It's a bit of a pity because I like the basic idea of Rue. It's a really powerful way of creating applications. And I guess work of porting that to Vaadin 7 is not too much. The thing is basically maintaining it. It's a bit of a hassle because I don't see Rue going too fast forwards anyway. So, but if you are interested, the project is Apache license and open source, so you can grab it and port that to Vaadin 7. So I'll jump a bit ahead to how to get started. Then let's get back here. So there are many tutorials around. I guess the best one is just if you click Learn and Tutorial. It shows you step by step how to build Vaadin application, and it kind of shows visually which parts of the code are kind of creating which part of the UI. For Eclipse, you just go to Marketplace and click Install, search for Vaadin and click Install. Idea, built in. NetBeans, you go to NetBeans plugin portal, search for Vaadin and install. For Maven, there are multiple archetypes. I guess the most usable or most generic one is application archetype that generates a new application for you to start from. I guess that one of the most important features of Vaadin is that it's really well documented. So there is a full book, 700 something page book about Vaadin. You can download it for free. If you bump it to our guys in some expo, we probably have hard copies of that as well. But it basically walks you through the whole framework step by step. So, and it's pretty quick read, so I would recommend to take a peek of that. It's also available as EPUB if you want to read it from iPad. People are asking Are there any hooks in Vaadin? There is not. We are open source company, and we are like truly free open source company. So this is Apache licensed. You can do whatever you want with Vaadin Framework. And because of that, we don't really know who is using Vaadin Framework because it's free. We guess that there are around 100,000 users at the moment all around the world. We are seeing around 150,000 unique visitors each month in the developer portal, and in Ohlok that is ranking like the user bases and code bases, they are ranking us as the second most used Java web framework after Spring MVC. I don't know what the reality is, it's how well are the statistics. But let's have some questions first and then maybe take a look in the future.
So when you're doing a web app, usually you want to go between multiple pages, right? You know, all the examples we've seen, just Ajax calls, updating there. So if you're redirecting or going to a different page, especially for SEO and all, and for web applications, it's a good idea. So what do you do in the back end, like usually struts or Spring, you gotta use some?
Yeah, one is not that webby in that sense. So the framework is modeled as a component-based framework, so you're building the UI out of components, not out of pages. That said, it runs on a web browser, so we recognize the concept of page and URL. So there is a thing called navigator in Vaadin, where you can define a set of URLs, and then you can listen for the changes from this navigator and then switch to different states of the application. It is pretty automated, so to speak, so you can register different URLs and from those URLs jump into different parts of your application.
What if you want to pass states from one to the other?
No, I don't understand.
So if you want to pass between different pages,
Yep.
some data?
Yeah, so basically the application lives in the HTTP session. So you can store anything in the HTTP session. Everything in this UI object is basically living for the lifetime of this web page. If you are changing the kind of hashtag URLs, the parts after the hashtag on the URL, the page doesn't get reloaded. You can change the URL and the state stays over there. If you want to preserve the state over the page reloads, you can say for the UI preserve state. You can add an annotation preserve state, and that way, even if you reload the page, it stays on the same state. So you can actually keep the state all the time over there.
Can we also do partial? So part of it, if we don't want to, and part of it we just want to move. Because it could be a form post, right? So it could be credit card information coming in, but I don't want to send all of it. I might just want to send some of it to the next.
Yeah, it's up to you what you are putting in the state. So that was a really vague explanation. So I show that in practice. For example, this demo over there. Now the URL is like this. If I click over there, it actually adds this hash UI over there. I click to data input, it adds UI/data input. The page is all the time the same, the state stays the same on the server side, and I can actually change these from URL directly, and it kind of animates back.
But hash is not really an SEO. Does Google understand? I mean, because whenever you're building a web, is that easily changeable?
Yeah, there are 3 different variants. So the hash is the default. Hash bang is the one that the Google understands, so that then it indexes these as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can also use full URLs like this.
Oh, you can. Okay.
For the full URLs, the thing is that it actually reloads the page, so it makes the application slower than on the downside.
Oh, okay.
Did you say Vaadin is free?
Yes.
So how do you make your money?
So we have 2 things. most of the money comes, so most of the revenues comes from services for companies who are using Vaadin. So this is used by huge enterprises, and our customers are typically software development teams who are using Vaadin. We do everything from training to actually coding the UI components to actually coding the whole UI layer for the companies. That's one part. Another part is that we have some add-on components like this charting library that I showed there. This is a commercial charting library. It costs up like 500 USD or something like that per user. We have a testing tooling. Basically, you can record regression tests and store these as JUnit tests. And we also have mobile UI component library. But these are like really, I would say, optional and add-on type of things on top of Vaadin. So we are not forcing anybody to use these.
Is there any way to make let's put this offline applications?
Yes. I'll show you a demo if it's easier that way. So let's open up. Cool. Oops, it's a bit large. Okay, so here's my iPhone, and I'll go this. Maybe if I actually go to try and get to network. Yes, I can get to online. So let's go to demovaadin.com/parking. So this is mobile application built with Vaadin. This is for actually writing parking tickets, so really positive theme for our application. So in the first view, you can write the ticket. Second view, you can kind of see where the tickets are written all over the map. This is my car here in Turku. You can list through different tickets. You can see interactive statistics. So it's a full-blown web application. What we can also do, we can save this one on the home screen. Let's go B. Store it over there. And of course, when I start it up, it actually goes back online to the same application. And nothing special over there. If I actually go to offline, I'll just cut the cord from here. So I guess now I should be, yeah. I'm not in the internet anymore. It actually recognizes that, hey, now we are offline. And it actually hides these 3 tabs from there because these are implemented on the server side. The first tab itself is implemented on the client side. If you remember from the architecture diagram, there is also a possibility to put UIs on the client side. So the first UI over here is on the client side. And I can basically kind of write the ticket, and I guess I have to write something over here. Save it. Okay, and validate it. So area there as well. Okay, so now it's actually saved that to a local store, local database, and if I go back to the online, we are online. Not yet. Almost. T-Mobile, please. Yeah. But I gotta get things are gonna wake up.
Don't get insulted. He did it in the AWS meeting as well.
Okay, what would happen if I would get back to online is that it actually recognizes that, hey, now we are online, it synchronizes database back to the server side, and it kind of enables these 3 tabs. So that way you can actually build offline applications. And the key thing over there is that building offline applications is actually super expensive. All these kind of merging logic, all this client-side database handling, building the communication from client to server side and back is actually quite hard thing to do compared to writing everything on the server side. And what my kind of claim over there is that if you have an application where you only need part of the application to be offline, try to write only that part offline and the rest of the only that part on the client side supporting offline and the rest of the application on the server side, because that way the combination is much cheaper.
So, how do you distinguish between the, let's say, different clients right now? So, before you've written on the server side the code and you use Safari, whatever, to look at it. If you're using now a mobile phone, do you have like a separate code branch for the mobile?
You can have, but you don't have to have. So
like in this case that you just had where you had the ticketing.
So actually the same ticketing solution, if I run that on a Chrome.
It's the same app, or is it a different?
It's exactly the same app over here in Chrome.
So it's the same code base behind.
Yeah, so there are no changing at all. And we can do things like responsive layouts where it actually recognizes that it's a bit wider and it splits it into 2 columns and does that kind of stuff. But in this case, it's still just one code base, one implementation of the application.
You mentioned that you store stuff on your local database, like on mobile device.
Yep.
You would put into use SQLite or whatever, right? Which you don't have on a regular browser.
On some browsers you do, on some browsers you don't. So if you're doing things on the client side, then you are more or less on your own. You have to live with the browser limitations. So we cannot abstract away from the browser if you choose to jump to the browser side.
So you would have 2 different code bases to support 2 different versions.
Most of the cases, no. But I'm seeing that in some applications you want to implement like really specific mobile version of the application. You have most of the UI implementation is shared with the desktop and the client implementation, but layouting logic is separate, and maybe some UI components are separate.
But that's exactly the thing that you abstract completely away, right? That's exactly what you control by, you're not really writing the client component. You're doing the rendering in your runtime environment, which I cannot control.
I'm not sure if I understood the question fully. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are writing things on the server side, it works out of the box with all the different browsers. If you want to go to the browser side, then you are on your own with browser limitations. So let's say this one browser might have a SQLite, this other browser don't have. So you have to kind of smooth out those differences yourself. But if you go to the client side, it really doesn't make any sense to write both client side and the server side implementation of the same thing, because you should be able to reuse the same implementation in different browsers. But where the case where you want to do different implementations is basically screen size, and in some cases you want to support touch or make the touch gestures the kind of main way of communicating with the application. So those are the differentiating parts. But even those are quite small in a way that it doesn't make sense to actually implement or maintain 2 different parallel implementations in most cases.
you know how you build your own communications protocol using the widget and in the server and client, you have to keep them synchronized. How secure is that? Has it been hacked or your proprietary one? Are you using encryption?
We are running on top of SSL. So if you choose to use SSL, so that way it's as secure as well. What we can add to the picture is that because it has been used by, it's basically shared by all the Vaadin applications, so we have been able to put a lot of effort into making that super secure and adding automated protections about most typical attacks. But in the end of the day, you still can do stupid stuff like open up your, put some stuff onto a database without validation, or open up your application for a SQL injection or something like that. But some things we can protect against, like we can wrap around this JSON in such a way that it cannot be executed on the client side. And we can do double cookie validation out of the box and that kind of stuff that is normally should be implemented in applications to make them secure, but in many cases there are so much of an extra hassle that people don't implement this. I think the more kind of profounding security difference is that because in Vaadin your UI logic resides on the server side, it's more of a black box to the users. They don't see your UI code base. While as if it would be implemented that in JavaScript, anybody can download it, anybody can see what's inside, anybody can actually start to kind of guess that, hey, this guy has implemented these APIs on the server side, maybe I could use the same APIs in a different way. And also, we basically don't open up any application-specific APIs to the web. We have to open up like one hole that is good for asking updated UIs, not like address book contents or anything like that. So you end up not opening those application-specific APIs to the web, and that way it's quite a bit harder to exploit.
Have you encountered where you have error handling where you get interrupted and then they get out of sync, you know, the widgets?
Yes, that's possible that they get out of sync. We have put a lot of effort into keeping these into sync, but some special cases are still over there, and basically the most horrible one is that I have this application running over here, I close my laptop, go to different network, open it up, session has expired on the server side. So we try to quite recover from that as gracefully as possible, but it's not always possible. So in the worst case you have to reload the page. So it's not that kind of big thing to be able to just reload the page, because this is what you are doing in many other cases as well. But it's because there is server-side state, it can get out of sync.
Can I ask you for the sort of executive level sales pitch of Vaadin versus JSF and WIT-P? That's how you pronounce that?
I guess that the two different things in Vaadin would be rich components, so there are many features and there are many components that they look pretty. And the second thing would be productivity of the server-side property model. So compared to GWT directly, you should be seeing something like 2x to 3x code reduction on the UI layer, and that did actually translate directly to the cost of the implementing and maintaining it. Compared to JSF, you should see quite a bit more rich components. I guess the prime phase would be the nicest implementation at the moment, but the components are pretty far away from what you have in core component library as well as in the directory in Vaadin. And at the same time, within Vaadin you would have to deal with XML or JSPs or integrating JavaScript components on your hand and kind of handling all the dependencies over there. So it's quite a bit more simple to build those rich UIs. I guess this would be the pitch. Any other questions? Yep.
In your UI classes, in terms of thread safety, I mean, it looks like that you have one UI class, and so if you're going to have a state across, say, multiple HTTP sessions, how would you handle thread safety?
Really good question. So basically, UI class is not thread safe.
Okay.
So this UI class contains components that are seen on one particular web page at one time. And it must be guaranteed that only one thread is accessing that at one time. So basically, in the web browser takes an AJAX connection back to the server side and makes some changes in the UI, receives some changes. We should guarantee that nobody else is actually accessing that. And for that, there is, I guess the most typical case where something might go wrong is that you have a background thread that is updating the UI at the same time. Let's say you have a progress bar showing how many results you have been already calculating on your superload calculation on the server side. There is a method called UI.access that should be used to actually update that from the backend. So you just give a runnable for this UI.access, and Vaadin runs that on a such thread and such time where it's safe to do. So we can that way guarantee that no two threads are accessing the same UI at the same time.
So you're saying otherwise it's stateless?
Sorry?
So normally it's stateless?
No, it's fully stateful.
It is.
So the UI state basically contains the state of the UI components on that particular web page, and that lives in HTTP session. That kind of brings the scalability question, how much it scales actually. For that, there are three different aspects. First of all, we are doing computing on the server side, so clearly it needs more server CPU and client side. We are more chatty than client side, so we go back and forth over the wire, and that needs network. And because we are storing things on the server side, that clearly eats server memory. And out of these three, actually the fourth one is normally the bottleneck. The backend is normally the bottleneck, but if the backend wouldn't be the bottleneck, the first bottleneck typically is the server memory consumption. So Hello World application would consume around 10 to 15K of server memory per active user. This application, I guess, would consume like 80K or around that. Like enterprisey, I don't know, banking application could consume 200K and so forth. You might see an application with up to 1 meg of server memory consumption per active user. That kind of pretty much dictates how many users you can run for one server. We have been doing tests where we have been seeing 10 to 15,000 concurrent users per front-end server. So if you're running 10 servers in parallel, you can have like 100,000 concurrent users accessing the same application concurrently. So it wouldn't be enough for Gmail, I guess. It's pretty much enough for any enterprise application. Okay, so I guess we are pretty much done from the time-wise.
Yes, you're on time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well.
Raffle.
But since that is the final thing, I would like to thank Joonas to have this unique Java Judd pen.
Okay.
You're being knighted. Thank you very much.